So, what is the ABBA deadlock? Well, let me try to explain this to you philosophically. I kind of want to coin this term for a specific reason, and it's a very multi layered and complex topic to talk about. But let's talk about what ABBA can mean. Well, ABBA, ABBA, can mean a couple different things. One of those things can be, for instance, in computer programming. Um, if you've ever worked with C or Python or anything to that nature, you know that it there's syntax and ontology that belong in your program in order for it to work. Syntax, you can consider it as the laws that govern your program, and the ontology of your program is how you structure all those laws in order for the program to function correctly. Another thing when it comes to ABBA or ABBA is it is essentially the way your coding has to be structured. The syntax has to be coded in a specific way, and the program won't work. It's a proper nesting of characters in order for the program to work, because essentially the computer is at the lower level reading nothing but ones and zeros. Also, Abba appears in the Bible. Jesus uses it in Mark 14:36. Abba, Father, not what I will, but what you will. And then Paul says in Romans 8:15, you receive the spirit of adoption by whom we cry, Abba, the Father. Those are very interesting um, things to say. If you get what I mean, even if they're allegories, they're very interesting things to say. So, why would you think those things are so important, right? And that's where the layering comes in. The complexity of it is when you're on the precipice of something, is sometimes you're able to start to make these connections at certain layers, which is very interesting. And I believe personally that we are at the precipice of the next stage of enlightenment, or what I would like to consider wisdom. So you might ask, why is this so important? Well, I just recently seen this article today that um, quoted Elon Musk in saying that we are at the synchronicity point. It was something to that effect. I don't use what is it, X or any of those, so I just go by what I see in the news. Which leads me to the next layer is, who is Elon Musk? Well, Elon Musk is the, I guess, CEO, founder, owner. I don't know. Maybe he pulled it out of the dirt like Tesla or any of these other companies, but he currently owns Neuralink. So Neuralink is very interesting, right? In the sense of what it can and can't do. So let's just start off with the things that technically it can't do. It can't read your thoughts, your private thoughts. It can't control your behavior, meaning it can't control your neurological system. It cannot upload memories, and it cannot make you smarter instantly. And it cannot connect the internet to your head, which is an interesting concept. However, I always cover inputs, processes, and outputs, control systems, and feedback, right? What some things it can do with users: move a mouse cursor, type text, play simple games like chess, use a computer without hands or voice. Also, It's good at decoding thoughts using AI. Things like machine learning models are trained to recognize patterns. These patterns can help to move the cursor and also, like for instance, help um, uh, bring the system more into tolerance so that way what his brain is outputting is what the computer sees, so that way there's stability, say, in the mouse cursor. Just look up the videos, you get what I mean. And it can also read brain signals, meaning specific neuron firing patterns within the brain. And there's a couple other little caveats to that, but it sends the data wirelessly to a computer. It can filter noises and also amplify signals, which is very interesting. This is a surgical procedure, so that means that this chip is imprinted into the brain, which currently makes sense based on our technologies and the people that are willing to integrate this stuff into their body. So, in the big picture, Neuralink can read signals from the brain from firing neurons, translate those signals into computer commands, right? Ones and zeros, syntax, ontology, right? Potentially send signals back to the brain in the future. So, without deviating too much, I would like to also tell you a topic that is a fundamental principle in science called cybernetics or kybernetes, right? It's about being a steersman and controlling the progression of science and biology, et cetera, et cetera. But it's an old school um, type of science that was developed after World War II. We did a lot of stuff with the Russians in conjunction with that, MK Ultra, and later adoptions of psychology and psychiatry were adapted, and it's become more of a model of not necessarily, I guess you would call it man and machine, but more of a philosophical type study. If you're ever interested, there's this guy named Michael Levin from Tufts University up in Mass. He probably knows a little bit more about the biological side of this. So, getting back to what the ABBA deadlock is, the ABBA deadlock is the breaking of that barrier, the things that Neuralink can't do currently. However, this is progressive and it can also be looked at holistically as well. We are, you have to look at it as we are burdened by our material. However, we are always a source of energy. We are always a flow of energy, right? And we are currently on the precipice, I believe, not only when it comes to AI and quantum computing and um, uh, different neurological advancements and biological advancements and chemical advancements, and even the advancements in gene doping and crisping. And, you know, the short term is building a CRISPR baby biologically. What if I told you that the gray matter and the white matter in your brain holistically early on in stages using peptides and simple invasive forms of brain development could help to connect those neurons or gray matter, essentially your cortex, you know, the part uh, that helps with a lot of all of this, right? That helps to store all of this knowledge could begin to be molded. Essentially, think of gray matter as clay, gray clay being brought from the earth and molded and and the neurons and stuff starting to be connected early on in life. Now, I'm not saying that this technology will be developed right away. It will come in many stages. However, I might not see it in my lifetime. I'm older, but it is possible that these younger generation kids, I would say under the age of 20, could possibly see the development of this technology in the early stages, or even what I consider the ABBA block or deadlock brain barrier. Now, I know a lot of people, that's crazy, but do the research for yourself. You have to understand that with our current CPU technology, our processor technology, at the end of the day, we are only forcing zeros and ones one at a time in multiple threads, essentially. Once the adaptation of quantum computing happens and that becomes paralleled or even at a sense um, stationary, right? That these these com- these processors can think of them. These processors, these brains, these computer brains, can now parallel our thoughts, not necessarily chemically, but through the adaptions of the ones and zeros through a lower level programming, energy, electrons, the adaptation of um, you get what I'm saying, right? That's nothing but what a CPU really is at the lowest level is it's an arc, it's a spark. So I'm not necessarily saying breaking the ABBA deadlock will make you instantly smarter or be able to connect your brain to the internet, but it could give you a progressive higher state of learning and knowledge, fundamental principles that you structure 20 years of your life learning and developing in order to try to be successful in life. Not only those type of structures, those learning structures, emotional structures. You get what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter what the thought is. The thoughts are just put into place. Anyways, I don't want to keep it any longer than that because I would actually like to delve further and give more detail on how I think it could possibly happen. If you're interested, you know, hey, follow and leave a like, whatever. I appreciate all feedback. I am, you know, all criticism is constructive criticism, and like I said, one-on-one conversations sometimes are the best. Peace, 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 peace. My compass rolls